Welcome to the Flower Files, where we plant stories and grow conversations. I'm your host, Liza Getz, flower farmer, florist, educator, and founder of Wildly Native Flower Farm and the Flower Files podcast. Each week on the Flower Files, we dive into the world of flower farming, gardening, floral design, local flowers, small business, and the people who make this industry so incredibly special. So whether you're a flower farmer, a gardener, a florist, a flower enthusiast, or someone dreaming about turning a passion into a business, you're in the right place. Before we jump into today's episode, I have a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying the Flower Files and you're listening on YouTube, please take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a fellow flower lover. Those simple actions help more gardeners, growers, florists, and flower enthusiasts discover the show. You guys already know what to do. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to follow the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps us continue bringing your conversations, ideas, and things that educate, inspire, and connect our flower-loving community. Now grab your coffee, step into the garden, and let's get growing. Have you ever walked into your garden and suddenly noticed holes in the leaves or yellowing or even black spots or something crawling and immediately thought, oh my God, I'm going to lose the whole crop or I'm going to lose that whole section of my garden? We've all done it. We've all walked in and panicked a little. But the problem is most people don't diagnose their plants backwards. They start with the treatment. Instead of figuring out what's actually happening, they kind of jump the gun. So today's episode is going to save you money, save you time, and save you a little frustration and probably some stress. Because not every damaged leaf needs to be sprayed or treated. And not every yellow leaf means disease. Sometimes your plant is perfectly healthy. Sometimes it's the weather, sometimes insects are actually helping you, and sometimes there really is a problem. So today, I'm going to show you how to tell the difference. And by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly what to look for before you ever reach for a spray bottle. Okay. So everybody knows you're supposed to talk to your plants and it makes them grow better and it makes them happier and makes you happier. Plants actually do speak a language because they can't tell us what's wrong. They just leave clues. So we have to think like a detective because every clue matters. So when you look at your plant, you need to look at it and think about, okay, well, what's changed? Because if you walk through your garden and you look at your plants and all of a sudden you're like, that looks different, but I can't put my finger on it. That's where you start. You say, what changed? And where did it start? Is it every plant or is it just one variety? Is it only one area or is it the entire section? Was it overnight or was it gradual? And the biggest question is, what has the weather been? Because Mother Nature definitely has some tricks up her sleeve. The weather often tells you more than the plant, honestly. So here's the golden rule when it comes to trying to diagnose what could be going on in a garden. You never want to diagnose from just one plant or just one leaf on the plant. First, look at the entire plant and then look at the neighboring plants. And then look at your whole setup, whether that's your backyard or an entire field. You want to look at the overall picture because patterns really matter. Patterns really are going to tell you what you're seeing and what some of those different pieces could be. And quite honestly, sometimes nothing is wrong. And I love this because it immediately should reduce your anxiety. Sometimes there really is nothing wrong. Sometimes the plant is maybe a little heat stressed. So heat stress, it's summertime. We all have a little heat stress. So when it's super duper hot or super duper humid, or it's just been extendedly dry, sometimes when it's really hot, the leaves droop. They're just tired. And sometimes the flowers flop over a little. Sometimes they just look miserable. Yet, when it's cooler in the evening and they recover, that's not disease. That's literally summer. I think one of the biggest divas that do this is probably hydrangeas. I know in last week's podcast, we talked about how to water. And I think a lot of the times people look at a plant and they say, oh my gosh, it's wilted. And the first thing they want to do is they want to add more water to it. Touch your soil, check your soil. Make sure that that is actually what the plant needs, because that's summer. Sometimes the plants react to it's summer. And let's think about the logistics of summer as well. So you have thunderstorms that come through. So sometimes your plants have a little bit of damage. Sometimes they have torn leaves, maybe some broken stems, maybe the petals look a little scuffed or pushed around. Sometimes they just look awful. That's not contagious. You can't catch thunderstorm damage from one plant to another. Sometimes there's hail, little bits of hail, and that can create tiny, tiny holes. And those tiny holes can mimic things that look like insect damage. You can have shredded foliage, and people could think that that's insects. But if that plant is getting whipped around in the wind really intensely, it could look like insect damage, and it's actually not. It's just wind damage. So, Mother Nature. Another one that I think people commonly see and they misdiagnose is sun scald. We actually saw this spring in our peonies. We had a beautiful spring, nice, cool weather that kind of led up to peony season. We had a couple heat spots, and then all of a sudden, we got whacked with hot, hot, hot weather, like midsummer weather, July weather in May. And all of the summer plants that we had planted were like, oh, this is great, we're going to grow. But all of my spring plants that like that soft, gentle break into the summer season and the gentle decline of spring were like, wow, what just happened? So we ended up with some sun scald. We had a couple bleached leaves. We had some white patches. We had some burn. But none of that comes from a pathogen. It doesn't come from a virus. It doesn't come from a disease. It doesn't present like that. It just was the plant's way of saying, wow, I'm really stressed and now I have a little sunburn. So yes, plants can get sunburn. On top of the fact, again, I'm going to relate back to last week's or refer back to last week's episode where if you're not watering correctly and you have water on your plants, you're going to end up with the potential for some burning from the plants midday, because that water droplet on that plant leaf is going to act like a magnifier. I see this more in some of the greenhouses and hoop houses more regularly than I would see outside. But if it is dead summer and it's hot and you look out back and you know you have not watered those patio pots, or you know you haven't watered that section of the garden, you go, oh my gosh, I better go do that real quick. Keep the water off the leaves so you don't end up with some of those spots because of it. Another thing that can make your plants look a little stressed or like they have a disease is what's called transplant shock. So when you get a plant, and even if you've grown it from seed yourself, transplant shock is when you have the plant and you put it in the ground and it's just trying to adjust. And they're like, wait, what just happened? I just got moved. I just got put into the ground. I'm not sure about my new surroundings. And sometimes that can happen too if you haven't hardened off your seedlings enough or your plant enough. So imagine you're growing in a nice conditioned greenhouse or hoop house, and then all of a sudden you take your plants and you just plant them outside. They haven't been exposed to wind before. They haven't been exposed to the real harsh elements of outside. It's why we brush the tops of our seedlings consistently. It toughens up the stems and it just gets them used to maybe a little bit of contact to reduce that transplant shock. Another thing that you can see if you're trying to understand what's going on with your plant is a little bit of wilting. So when there's a little bit of wilting happening from your plants, that's telling you something. It's telling you either that it's too dry, and if you touch your soil and it's dry and you dig down and you know that it's too dry, that can be something that you know that you can fix, you can water. But there's other reasons for wilting, and we're going to talk about those a little bit further in this episode. You've got yellow leaves or some slow growth. Those can all be perfectly normal. So wilting is normal, some slower growth, and some yellow leaves are all perfectly normal. Your old leaves are going to die as the plant ages. That's just part of how the plant works. Your lower leaves are naturally more yellow, especially on tomatoes. Everybody loves their tomatoes and they kind of obsess over them. Same thing with zinnias and even some sunflowers. Those are the plants that often get a lot of bottom yellow leaves, and not everything needs fixing. It's okay to go ahead and trim them off if the yellowing bothers you. And actually that way, then the plant isn't putting its energy into producing those leaves and helping them die off. Another thing, if you're talking about flowers specifically, and sometimes on vegetables, you might see pollination marks. There may be marks left from the various creatures that perform the pollination. So those pollination marks, some flowers simply just look a little rough after pollination. There's a lot that actually happens in the plant during pollination. It doesn't mean that something attacked them. Maybe it's actually what the plant should be doing. So weather. Summertime has all of these extremes. You've got heat, you've got thunderstorms, you have wind, you have hot days, you have cooler days. Here on the East Coast, we deal with a fair amount of humidity. So you have all of these factors that really go into what the plant has to survive and be comfortable with. So weather can create these fake problems. Weather causes many of the issues that often we'll blame on pests. So you've got long rainy periods. As I mentioned, humidity. And then you have some cool nights or some hot afternoons. You have those temperature swings from storms where you've got it really hot one day and then it cools off the next. All of the heavy dew that some plants have sit on them. Wind. Wind does lots of things. And all of these things put together, they don't necessarily create disease, but they can create the conditions where disease can actually happen. And that's a really important distinction because weather isn't the enemy, it's just changing the environment. So this year we've had some of the best status that we've grown in years. It's beautiful, it's thick, it's full, it's constantly producing. I'm not seeing rust on it like I have in the past. Everything is aligning for that plant. It's really happy. It's all related to weather. We've had a lot of dry weather, and that's what that plant really loves. It loves it hot and dry. We happen to put some in the field this year. Normally we grow it in the hoop house because that's where it likes it. Now, some of my other plants, like my cosmos, they are super upset about the weather this year. They don't like this kind of weather. They like it a little cooler. They like it a little damper. So the weather is not your enemy. It's literally just changing the environment. I can't tell you how many times I get pictures from people. They'll send me a leaf. They'll send me a picture of a close-up of a leaf and say, what is this? And I think that's one of the hardest things to explain to people and to actually diagnose is when it's just a leaf, because it's just a snippet of a section of a moment. As we just went through, did you have hail? Do you have kids? Do you have dogs? Did something drive past it? Did the lawnmower shoot something across? What is your watering practice? What does the rest of the plant look like? I think that's the biggest distinction that really, really helps me understand. Don't hand me just a leaf. I want to see the entire picture. Do you have heat radiating off of something that's behind it that's creating something that's abnormal for your growing region? Something simple as a fence that's painted a darker color is going to increase that heat stress. Anything that's near a driveway, my gosh, that's all going to increase your heat stress. So before people kind of start to freak out a little bit about things that are happening in their garden or to their plants, we need to understand the entire environment. But there are absolutely times where you have to figure out, was it an insect? So instead of memorizing all of the insects, you need to look at the damage overall. And I'm going to break that down a little bit. So there's chewing damage. These are large holes, missing leaf edges, or skeletonized leaves. I think the skeletonized leaves fascinates me the most, because you ever get that piece of lettuce and you have all the soft parts of the lettuce, but then you get, my dad used to call it the lettuce bones. He got in trouble a lot as a little kid for not wanting to eat the bones of the lettuce. But it's that harder, thicker part. Think of the back rib of a piece of romaine. Well, if you have insects that are going to come in and they're going to skeletonize those leaves, they leave all of those bones of the lettuce. It's kind of fascinating. So if you have caterpillars, Japanese beetles, grasshoppers, slugs, tiny pinholes, ragged holes, you've got a lot of different clues right there. Lots of different kinds of clues. So if you have a caterpillar is going to come in and they're going to start at the edge most of the time and just work their way through and completely eat the plant down to nothing. It's going to be missing parts. They start at the edge, you have your larger and larger and larger holes. Japanese beetles, those guys, they're the ones who will come in and skeletonize a plant. Slugs probably leave you the best clues that there are. They leave a trail, and they will also leave holes. If you have tiny little pinholes, those are usually caused by what's called a flea beetle. If you have ragged holes, those are usually some type of chewing insect, think grasshopper. If your leaves are sticky, if you're looking at your leaf and it has a little bit of a shine to it and it's not a slug trail, but it's sticky, that is usually what's called honeydew. This episode of the Flower Files is made possible by our sponsors. Bob Bell Chevrolet, helping Maryland drivers stay safe on the road with dependable vehicles and exceptional customer service. Ivingo Creative, providing branding, website design, and marketing solutions that help small businesses tell their story and grow with confidence. And the Tax Chick Pro, helping entrepreneurs, farmers, and small business owners navigate taxes, bookkeeping, and financial planning with less stress and more clarity. We are grateful for their support of the Flower Files and our growing community of flower lovers, gardeners, farmers, and small business owners. So if you're looking for honeydew or you're finding honeydew and it's sticky, that's usually from aphids or whiteflies. Those guys will suck the juices out of the plant, and then as they ingest it, their poop basically is a sticky liquid that then will get onto the leaves. It makes them shiny and sticky. And the nice word for it is honeydew, but the reality is that is whitefly and aphid excrement. If you have leaves that are starting to curl, look underneath, because a lot of the times that's when an insect is hiding and they have curled that leaf around themselves to kind of hide underneath. That gives you a clue as to somebody could be curled up in there. Now, if you have curling and you have browning on the edges with no insect involved, that's different. So you have to understand how the flower or how the leaf is curling. A huge indicator of having an issue is some type of webbing. And I'm not talking like a spider web. There is a different type of webbing that certain types of insects will leave. So if you have webbing, you could have caterpillars, you could have spider mites because they leave little teeny tiny webs. There's a lot of spider mites that form during hot, dry weather. The biggest tip here is always flip your leaf over, because half the story is actually underneath. So yet again, get out and get into the garden. So let's compare that to disease. Because if you're trying to decide, is it an insect that's left damage or is it disease? Disease sometimes can be a little trickier because you have to have the right setup for the disease to be there. And sometimes diseases actually mimic some of the other types of damage that can happen to a plant. But the biggest thing is disease usually follows some type of pattern, and that falls into 4 major categories. So if you have a fungus, you're going to have some type of, you usually have some type of spot. There's usually some kind of mark. There's usually some kind of indicator that you have a fungus happening. So think of powdery mildew. That's a spot. If you have some type of fuzzy growth, that's a spot. If you end up with some type of fungus that has spots and powders and fuzzy, you have all kinds of fungus going on. So again, check the top, but also check the bottom of your leaf. Powdery mildew sits on top of the leaf. Downy mildew sits on the bottom of the leaf, and they both leave marks. Another indicator for fungus is some type of rot. And I think this is a little more prevalent in probably fruit and vegetable production, but we see it with flowers. If there's some type of rot, if there's some kind of issue, if something is happening, that rot will become apparent and that fungus can really bloom. Same thing with bacterial. And sometimes some of these are introduced by pests. Some of these are introduced by other factors. If you have a plant that looks wilted or water soaked, so there's the wilted look, but then there's also the really like I'm drowning and I have too much water. You have that water soaked appearance. That's a totally different scenario. If you ever have anything that's oozing, that is also a fungal or a disease issue. That's now, sometimes that will mean that you have something that has bored into a stem. So you really need to understand what oozing you're talking about. The other thing to consider is it spreading rapidly? So if you have it in one spot at the beginning of the day and it's spreading rapidly, that's a little bit different. You definitely want to get that removed and you want to take care of that as quickly as possible, because that can cause all kinds of issues that you weren't aware of. Or maybe you have a virus and you didn't know that you had a virus. So that is something to absolutely make sure that you're taking care of by removal. And I want to make sure that when we talk about removal, very, very clear here. When you're removing it, you're not adding it to a compost pile. You're not putting it in a place where that virus can get picked up and spread. You want to completely remove it from the area. Put it in the trash, get it out of there. Because if you have a virus, if you have some kind of disease or something like that, you're definitely going to want to get that out of there. So if you have a virus compared to maybe some of your other diseases, some things to look for are a mosaic color. Color changes in an unusual way are some of the biggest factors that help you understand if it's viral versus fungal. If you have distorted growth, if something is happening that looks a little strange or unusual, all of these can absolutely come from some type of insect, but they can also come from a virus that is naturally occurring. So distorted growth, if you have a stunted plant, a lot of the times there's no cure for a virus. If it has a virus, that plant will eventually die, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no cure for many of the viruses that plants get, unfortunately. So I've talked a lot about things that are visible above ground, but there's plenty of things that happen below ground. And there are some root diseases. You could have wilting happening with the plant despite having damp soil. That could be rooting rots. And the plant in that section of disease, those plants tend to decline from the bottom up. Disease doesn't usually make random holes. Your insects do. So what's the difference between disease and virus? Disease usually doesn't make just random holes. That's not how a disease works. It's usually insects that do that. Disease changes the tissue. It actually changes the structure of the plant, where insects come back through and they're the ones removing the tissue. So before you treat anything, I'm going to give you a checklist. And this is an actionable thing for you to be able to do if you see something happening in your garden. So first things first, what exactly am I seeing? So before you go to the garden center, before you call your plant friend, before you send them a picture, you want to take a moment and say, what exactly am I seeing? Not, oh, my plant looks bad. But am I seeing yellow leaves or am I seeing brown spots? Am I seeing a chewed edge or is something wilting? What am I seeing and what does it mean? So the second thing is, how many plants is this happening to? Is it 1? Is it 10? Is it the entire section in your garden bed? That alone will tell you more than just my plant looks bad. Number 3. What has the weather been like? Do you have holes because of hail? Do you have holes because of somebody doing something close by? Do you have holes because of why? Why do you have holes? So figure out what the weather's been like. Maybe your leaves are slightly shredded because you had a thunderstorm that came through and it blew everywhere. Or maybe you just had straight up rain for 4 days and the plant's a little stressed because I don't want to drink anymore. So take some stock in what the weather's been like. 4, see if you can actually find an insect. And insects are really good at hiding. They're so good at hiding. So see what you can find. Some insects are super tiny and they're going to hide in the tiniest little crevice of leaf. Some insects are larger and much more obvious to see. Butterflies are beautiful, but don't forget, if you have a healthy garden, you should have bugs. And understand that caterpillars are part of that. So think before you try to treat everything. And don't treat invisible bugs. Don't spray just because. That actually harms your beneficials. And number 5, is it getting worse? Mother Nature has a balance. So if you have something, you could absolutely have something to counterbalance that. If you have aphids, you usually end up with ladybugs. But you need to decide where the level is, and maybe you need to help it a little bit. So if it's getting worse, okay, what can you do to help slow it down before you grab that spray bottle? Because many issues will eventually stop on their own. Observation a lot of the time saves unnecessary spraying or that panic of, oh my God, I'm going to lose the whole crop. So when do you actually treat? When should you take that moment to say, okay, I'm going to actually treat this? And I think this is the spot where a lot of people jump in a little quickly. So you want to treat when you are positive the problem is correctly identified. Also, if the damage is increasing and if the plant cannot outgrow the damage. If you're looking at everything and you're realizing that your harvest is threatened, you definitely want to treat then. And you want to treat when you know that the treatment will actually work. Don't spray just in case. As I said, that hurts your beneficial insects. It also can create some resistance in the insects, and it also costs money. So, and if you're not treating correctly, it may not even solve the problem. So sometimes doing nothing is the best answer. And that's really hard for gardeners. Really, really, really hard for gardeners because you want everything to be perfect, and that's okay. So my final takeaways from today are, remember these 5 things. Plants are always communicating. The weather causes more issues than we care to realize. Every damaged leaf doesn't mean there's a problem. You want to identify before you treat. And observation beats panic every single time. So the best growers aren't the ones who never have problems. They're the ones who know how to slow down, maybe observe, ask some good questions, and make informed decisions instead of emotional ones. Because your plants don't need to be perfect. They just need someone willing to pay attention. So thanks for hanging out with me today. If this episode maybe saved you from spraying something that didn't need to be sprayed or helped you finally understand how to listen to your plants a little bit differently, can you share it with another gardener or flower farmer? And if you've got a mystery plant problem, send me a photo and leave me a comment. It might even become the inspiration for a future episode of the Flower Files. So hit that like button. I've seen the like button hit a few times, so thank you for doing that. That just, I'm a touch person, so while I can't reach out and hug all of you, hitting the like button for me is kind of like a virtual hug. So I'm sending hugs to you. Thank you for just listening and learning and being a little part of my day. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Flower Files. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a moment to follow the podcast, leave us a review, and share this episode with a friend, a fellow gardener, a flower farmer, a florist, or just a flower lover. Your support helps us continue bringing more stories, more education, more inspiration to the flower community. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can hit that notification bell and never miss an episode. All of those things really do make a difference. You can find show notes, resources, and more flower-filled inspiration at Wildly Native Flower Farm. And be sure to connect with us on social media to continue the conversation. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and keep sharing the beauty that flowers bring to the world. This is the Flower Files, where we plant stories and grow conversations.